let you know that we will be going live on Facebook for about 1 minute or so. And then this will be just all for us to take on. So this is a wonderful day because today with us we have a very good friend of mine for many, many years. I can't even remember how long ago we met, with Christopher Hartwell, who is the head of the International Management Institute at Zurich University of Applied Sciences, School of Management and Law in Zurich, obviously, as of February 2021, arriving from the UK. I'm sure that was a very interesting trip that Chris and his family took. Chris, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Chris has been giving us interviews for the magazine over the years, and it's always a great read. And thanks to COVID, we now can have it recorded and basically on air live. Chris, first of all, I would like to take this opportunity and congratulate you with the new position. Would you be so kind and tell us about your tasks and duties that you have, maybe a specific plan and strategies? I know you do. Which programs and projects are you planning on working?
Of course, of course. Well, I was brought in to ZHAW, the Zurich University of Applied Sciences, to really kind of make the International Management Institute into a world-class research institute.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work, I was the president of CASE, the Center for Social and Economic Research in Poland, and really helped them to get back to kind of the top of the league rankings, the top think tank in Central and Eastern Europe. So they're hoping that I have some more magic left in my bag to be able to kind of really build their research functions, and also to really kind of increase collaboration with Central Asia, with the former Soviet Union, with Central and Eastern Europe, because that is where my expertise is, to really kind of drive this Swiss, Kazakh, Swiss, Uzbek, these kind of joint ventures in research and also in teaching and exchanges of students. So basically, but to make the Institute a world-class research institution.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. I hope that our magazine will be a good partner for you to publish those research results, or at least some of them or parts of them.
Well, I think the collaboration with EUROBAK, I think, will also be important, because we have a lot of kind of Swiss companies that we consult with. There's a lot of work that they do on intercultural kind of management and difficulties in entering in into foreign countries. So I think that would also be kind of interesting. So there's lots of opportunities.
Excellent. Taking into consideration your international experience and the knowledge of the economies of a few countries, could you give us a forecast of which countries will be among the first ones to overcome the consequences of the pandemics? And what, in your opinion, is the main criteria for rapid response to the events of the global crisis that affected basically all the countries of the world?
Yeah, I think that the important thing to remember here is that we're looking at two things. We're looking at the effect of the virus and what that has done in terms of the way we alter our daily lives and the way we think about value chains and travel and things like that. And the other is the response to the crisis, whether or not we lock down, whether we continue locking down, whether we say, okay, we'll not have a lockdown, then we will have a lockdown, and kind of the policy uncertainty that comes around with that. I think the one lesson we know is that nothing works, and perhaps everything works. Countries that locked down very stringently still saw high levels of cases. Countries that didn't lock down at all or had very kind of lax lockdown, like Switzerland and Sweden is often used as an example, also had high rates of cases. And then you can say the United States had these kind of massive explosion in cases because of the various jurisdictions. But then you look at California versus Florida, and very different approaches, but kind of the same results. So nobody knows really what the policy approach is and what's going to be better. I think what really is going to matter going forward is how severe the country was hit by COVID. You look at some countries in kind of emerging markets, and a country like Turkey has been growing, hasn't seen any kind of contraction, and will continue to grow. And it has been hit by COVID, but it didn't kind of undergo the really stringent lockdown. The United States was hit very, very hard by COVID, although kind of geographically changed or geographically differentiated, so that New York was hit very hard in the first wave, and now California is getting hit. But the kind of the diversity and the resilience of the economy means that it's still going to come out of it. It's whether or not politicians allow the economy to come out of it. If now we've just thrown out the idea of risk management and business has to be halted until all risk is eradicated. I think that's the real issue, and that comes to politics. That's not economics.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, in 2020, all the governments faced an unprecedented event affecting the entire population of the Earth. What do you think we can learn from 2020 now, and what needs to be done to minimize the impact of such large-scale disasters?
Yeah, I think the key issue is that decentralization works, that you can't run kind of this coordinated, massive response from a central level, that viruses are hitting locally, and there have to be kind of local capacity, and there has to be the local ability to handle, so that each community, if it is going to lock down or isolate, so it has the ability to be able to operate independently from the center. A paper that I've just done with two Russian colleagues looks at this in the context of Russia and kind of the environment, and how decentralization really helped the Russian environment get cleaner during COVID, because now the policies were with the people who were closest to it. It wasn't being done in the Kremlin 11 time zones away. It was being done in Ulan-Ude, and these people were more concerned about their environment. The same thing applies to kind of these health policies. Of course, you can say that for something like the vaccine, that needed a concerted kind of centralized push so that we can get the vaccines out. And I think that's important as well. But we need to realize that we can't just keep centralizing everything. The decentralization is necessary to build the kind of resilience that can absorb a blow like the virus and then keep going.
Very interesting thought there. What sectors of the economy have the pandemic caused the greatest damage in your view? And what tools can gradually affect the growth of the sectors, the coming back of them?
Without a doubt, it's travel and it's hospitality. You know, we flew from the UK to Switzerland, didn't know if we were actually going to be able to get out of the UK with its light switch lockdowns. We're locked down. No, we're not. Yes, we are. No, we're not. We went through so many hurdles in terms of the paperwork. And then when we got to Heathrow, it was a ghost town, you know, busiest airport in the world, and very, very few people there. So even if you have kind of the proper documentation to travel, you know, people are still going to be very wary of doing it in the future. It feels weird. I travel 100,000 miles a year, and this was the first time I had traveled in a year, and it felt weird to be on a plane again. So travel is definitely going to be harmed. Hospitality is the other one. Restaurants aren't being allowed to open. When are we going to go back to, I'd like to catch dinner, go out to some place? You know, when is that actually going to be normal again? In terms of the ways that we can support that, I don't really know what there is. I think businesses will find a way. Restaurants will have more kind of outdoor seating, or they'll have social distancing inside, but they make their money on turnover, on having people come in and having people come out. So it's going to be very difficult for them. For the travel industry, they need this kind of shock to the system to kind of rethink business models and rethink pricing, mainly because we've seen for far too long, especially in the United States, where I'm from, the minute that the airline industry suffers any kind of recession or any kind of decline in numbers, they run to the government with their hat in hand and say, we need money, bail us out. And we do for some odd reason. I'm sure it's the same here in Switzerland and elsewhere in Europe. So the airlines really need to rethink their business models anyway. Maybe this can help with it. But I fear that it's going to be more just throwing cash at the problem.
Mm-hmm. Any other sectors that come to your mind?
Well, pharmaceuticals is going to be fantastic. I think you see what everybody's with the vaccines, especially AstraZeneca, Pfizer are all doing very well. But you can kind of think about the flip side of that is that we've all been in our homes, we've all been wearing masks. So common cold is down, flu is down. So we're not actually buying as much of our other kind of pharmaceuticals. We don't get our Nurofen and our Sudafed and things like that. So there's going to be a reallocation. But retail in general, I think, is probably also kind of rolling with it and trying to figure out, how can we still do? Are we going to shift more online? I mean, how many times have we ordered online since the pandemic began? I mean, the line of Amazon people outside the house every day is astounding. So there are definitely winners and there are definitely losers, but I think it presages kind of a change for what we're going to see. I think also, if I may, the kinds of industries that really rely on international supply chains. Supply chains have held up very, very good during the pandemic, surprisingly well. But I think you'll find that in line with what I was saying about decentralization, you might find supply chains becoming more localized, more what can I get here in this country? What can I get locally, rather than necessarily going to China, going elsewhere. And I think that's going to be a consequence as well. And that's going to entail disruption.
Taking into account your experience as president of Center for Social and Economic Research in Warsaw, Poland, can we talk about milestones in the transition economies, which we think will come in the coming years? What are they?
Well, the transition economies, it's funny to still single them out 30 years after the case. It's like I mentioned former Soviet Union, and Soviet Union's been gone as long as I've been an adult. So we still kind of tar them with this brush and transition. In reality, all economies are transitioning, whether they're transitioning good or transitioning bad. Well, that's really up to the politicians. But if we think in terms of both Central and Eastern Europe and kind of the CIS states, the real milestone is now what happens for political transition. Political transition away from the first generation of leaders in Central Asia, kind of your holdovers from the last days of the Soviet Union. And then in Central and Eastern Europe, the transition to having liberal democracy be entrenched. And we see kind of the waves of populism in Poland and in Hungary, and whether or not we can get back to kind of a more pluralistic society in terms of the way that policies are made. I mean, I'm not one who thinks that just because a populist party won, that there's a flaw in democracy. That's actually a feature of democracy, is that you get to elect who you want, whether or not they're good. And if they behave like idiots when they're there, well, that's really on you because you voted for them. But in terms of, the milestone is where do they go from here? Do they continue to stay in the European Union while kind of flouting the European Union's rules? And then, as I said, elsewhere, it's kind of the transition away from the first generation of leaders. Is Tajikistan ever going to have a world without Rahman or Rahman's son? Things like that. How do you manage that kind of transition? I think that is the next milestone.
Thank you. And if we're talking about the industries and the impact of the pandemics and where the world is going, probably one of the most affected by the lockdowns is the education. And clearly there will be some changes in how education will be growing, developing, and progressing. In your opinion, what are the disciplines now that need to be given the special attention in education? What needs to be simplified? And what requires an immediate introduction of the undergraduate and master's degrees in the curriculum?
Yeah, well, this is a good question, especially when thinking about what is kind of happening with education and the fact that most of us, if we've been teaching, we've been teaching on the computer into the void because the students never turn on their cameras. They don't want to be seen. It's just like in class, they sit in the back and, keep their eyes down. So we're just kind of talking into the void. And then if you're a student, you pay lots of money, depending on where you are, for this kind of experience. But the university experience is more than just the lectures you receive. So understanding, that students learn in different ways has also been very difficult for them. And kind of the isolation that has come with lockdowns and things like that. So yeah, the educational system needs kind of a rethink, but it's always been that way. The tension between how people learn, how different people learn, how do we get the most amount of information to the most amount of people, knowing that some specific people may be left behind. I think one thing that's come out of this is how important research and science and scientists are to be able to do something like the vaccine in such a short amount of time. I mean, look at what happened yesterday. The United States landed a rover, Perseverance, on Mars. In the middle of a pandemic, we can still go to Mars. I think it shows science, how we need to have these advances, how we need to keep pushing forward and keep pushing the limits of what humans can do and human resilience. So engineering, things like that are going to be very important, probably less in terms of social sciences. Kind of your broader liberal arts education might take a back seat now to things that are more functional, that are more useful. And I think we need to do that. We need to kind of teach that as well. But we also need to kind of make an emphasis on the flexibility, on the resilience, on the entrepreneurship. I think this is something that we kind of have gone away from into, we try and put students into these separate categories when we see now that maybe we don't need to be in a lecture hall. Maybe some people can learn just by utilizing the computer and or through these kind of flexible methods. So once again, we need to look at kind of the best practices that come out of this. The problem is, of course, that we all got shoved into this at the last minute. And we all had to reorient ourselves. And I think we've had enough time that we can understand the best practices and what works and what doesn't. But there does need to be a rethink. And I think there needs to be an emphasis on much more tailored, much more personalized, much more flexible approaches towards education and education delivery.
Thank you. Chris, you being in education, you being an economist, you being an American living in Europe, and being a very smart man, what is going on in your head right now? What is the burning thought that that is out there and you would really love to share with the world?
Well, the first one is it's lunchtime. So obiad. Obiad is this. That's the first one is lunch. The second burning thought is that how good it is to see you again. And I love the fact that even because of this stupid pandemic, that it's brought people, around the world closer through the magic of Zoom and Teams. Well, not so much Teams, but Zoom and other things, which is fantastic. In terms of like the big academic thoughts, because you think I'm a smart man. Thank you again.
I do.
In terms of the big thought, my wonder is about kind of what next? When can we get back to normal? And I don't think we're ever going to get back to normal the way we know it. And that's fine. Again, there are some things that needed to be changed. My worry is that we've given policymakers and politicians a taste of what they can do in a crisis. And if you give them the power to, see what they can do in a crisis, suddenly everything is a crisis. And that, oh, now we need to shut down here. Now we need to do this. So that's my worry. The worry is whether or not we can actually move to the decentralization, whether we can actually keep our economy democratized, where it's not able to be shut down by a button from a far-flung capital. So that's the big thought now. And also, as I said, risk management. Can we get back to it? Can we know that there is something out there that now we're probably going to be living with for the rest of our lives, that there's coronavirus out there? Maybe it'll burn out. Hopefully it'll burn out. We'll all get herd immunity. But, how do we integrate that now into our lives and realize again that life is a risky thing, that we take a risk every time we wake up, we put our feet down in the morning and we go out. There is risk out there. It's kind of the rediscovery of risk, but my worry is that governments now think that we can totally get rid of risk. If we just had the right policies, there would be no more risk, and people will vote for that because who wants risk? Risk is risky. I vote for that guy. So.
Interesting. Thank you, Chris. This is the pool of questions that we had from our editing team. Now we are happy to open the floor for questions. We here have a banker, Gordon Hoskins is the head of Al Hilal Bank here in Kazakhstan. We have Rob with us, who is representing a Bayer company, and that's a pharmaceutical. Very smart people. And we also have here representative from Narhos is a EUROBAK member, and somebody with the name NM6. That's a really interesting name. So guys, the floor is open to your questions. Once you have a question, you can turn on your mic and ask Chris on air. Gordon?
Thanks, Julie. And thanks, Christopher, for those very interesting words. Question, I was reading an article recently about possible productivity gains that may or may not come out of this pandemic. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that. Do you think Zoom versus Teams or any other platform that we all might be using will improve productivity, or do you see other areas for productivity gains for economies generally?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, especially since we've had to run economies for the past year without any labor. We've had essential industries, and then people have been allowed to go in. But again, I mentioned kind of the shift towards Amazon and online retailing as an example of this shift to a specific type of reallocation, more in favor of technology and kind of away from labor. I think in terms of kind of overall, the use of technology over the past year and the fact that we have been relying so much on Zoom and Teams and other kind of platforms is great, but isn't going to show up in the short term in terms of productivity. Because what are we doing? We're overlaying the usual processes on top of it. We're having meetings that probably still could have been sent in an email or things like that, but we're just holding them now virtually rather than in real time. But this is just like the internet. The internet, was a huge thing in the 90s, and it led to the dot-com boom and bust because people overestimated it. But the truism that economists say is that in the short term, we vastly overestimate the effects of new technology. And in the long term, we vastly underestimate it. Because now what will we do today without the internet? But it's not, kind of this novel thing. So I think the productivity gains at kind of your normal office level are going to come in the coming years, as we learn to integrate these things into kind of our normal processes and then make them our normal processes, whether there's kind of this decentralized working from home, whether there's more flexibility. And of course, this changes everything, because then this has knock-on effects, in terms of congestion, way cities are designed, what infrastructure we place our emphasis on, our work-life balance, whole industries on kind of childcare, could also be reallocated. So I think there are massive changes that are going to come, but we're not going to see them now. And I think the same thing is happening too, but a bit more quickly in terms of the kind of automation and the move towards doing more with less in terms of labor. So there are going to be far-reaching kind of consequences of this, but they are far out in the future.
Thank you. Gordon, you happy with the answer?
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you very much for that, Christopher. It's interesting because I was just actually catching up with a former colleague from my previous employer, just catching up with him this afternoon, talking about transformation and digitalization in banking generally, and how that is actually changing the customer experience. And some of that comes down to productivity, but it also, I think, as you suggested, has impacts on people. And his comment, he works at a bank in another country in Eastern Europe, where they've gone through a massive transformation project, and one of their end goals will be a reduction in the number of people, because they'll be automating so many things. So it is going to be having significant long-term impact of that sort. I wonder if you have any comment on that.
Well, you can look at this two ways. Actually, there's three ways. The first one is that this is living the Marxist dream, right? Because everything was going to wither away, and then we could do whatever we wanted to. Marx didn't think it was going to be automation. He thought it was going to be some revolution of the proletariat. So, but if you're a Marxist, you must be heartened. If you're a capitalist, you're also heartened here, because it's releasing labor to do other things. I mentioned perhaps we need more researchers, perhaps we need more scientists. I mean, we can't have 100% scientists in the economy, because Lord help us if we were all PhDs. We'd all sit around and BS all day, and then nothing would get done. There'd be nobody there to do anything. But I teach that in my macro class.
You can say that as PhD, right?
Yeah, I can say that. Close the door behind me. But maybe for the industries of the future that we can't even conceive of right now. I mean, who would have guessed 20 years ago that I would have, I'd have a phone. You can't see it. It's my my mobile. I would have, a phone and a video recorder and a music player, and I could watch TV all in my pocket. This is fantasy land. So we can't even conceive of what's going to happen 20 years from now. And perhaps we're releasing the labor that's been working jobs that, we can conceivably take over with automation, and we're releasing to people to do the next big thing. Maybe the people that were working in an office have decided to go back to school, and they find a cure for cancer. So the problem is, of course, that entails kind of this disruption in terms of change. And I think that's what people normally kind of rail against. That, okay, we're losing jobs, kind of the Luddites in the UK in the 19th century. But life is a disruption. Like I said, life is a risk. So I think overall, this could have positives, but we'll have to see how it's managed too, because it's a political thing as well. Economic disruption, Schumpeterian creative destruction. These are all things which we tend to look to get smoothed over by our politicians as well. So, and whether or not we've come up with a solution to that, I don't think we have.
Okay, we have a question from Rob. Rob, you're on air.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you for this great talk so far. Really, very insightful for sure, I think, for all of us. You know, I have a question. I will come to that in a minute. Let me first make a couple of statements as a reaction to what you've said. And one of the main things, what I think is that crisis always also leads to innovation. And if I look to my own organization, Bayer, we were like quite old school in the way of working. And if you see how we work right now, there is this huge digital revolution within this kind of old school companies as well. And I think that's quite interesting to see. And I think there will be quite a new normal in many companies that will be totally different from the old school way of working and also the old school way of traveling. If you then look into the healthcare landscape a little bit, one short reaction to a statement from you that healthcare industry or pharma industry is doing well, that's correct. In general, they're doing quite okay. At the same time, if you look at our product portfolio for Bayer, you see quite a lot of patients that now cannot get their treatments that they normally get. So we see less cancer patients, we see less patients with ophthalmology treatment. So for pharmaceutical companies that don't have vaccines, it's not always a great crisis to have right now. It is also some negative impacts, especially for patients that are undertreated. So that's something that we sometimes forget about, and it's an important thing to note. But then let's come to the vaccination part, because I think we're all very excited about it. And I'm extremely happy with the positive data from Sputnik, of course, because I was a little bit worried about Sputnik, and now I was very happy to see the Lancet publication. But if you look at the plan for Kazakhstan with the vaccination, it is they plan to vaccinate 6 million people this year, throughout the whole year. It's quite a little bit less than many other countries.
Yeah.
Do you expect that there will be a disbalance in economy recovery due to the disbalance in vaccination per country?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question. Again, it comes down to kind of the risk appetite of a specific government. I mean, because here in Switzerland, the rollout of the vaccine is also going fairly slowly, but they've already started kind of the tentative steps to removing kind of the lockdown strictures, or at least some of the most strict bits of the lockdown. So, I mean, if you plug it in to kind of your risk matrix and say that, okay, there's still a chance that I could catch COVID even without the vaccine, but this needs to be done, that needs to be done, then I think you can have the economy kind of come back. It's interesting whether or not kind of the rollout of vaccines will be tied to economic recovery, because again, if you look over the past year with the myriad of responses, you haven't seen a consistent kind of economic evolution depending on who got hit by COVID the hardest, by what approaches they kind of took. There is a danger, I would say, long term. As I said, kind of if you're moving more local, if you're withdrawing from international supply chains, that you might be encouraged to, kind of avoid countries that have had a slow rollout. And that's definitely something that Kazakhstan, already being so remote from the rest of the world, apart from China and Russia, I think is something that is worrisome. So if it comes to this kind of two-tier economy, those who have been vaccinated and those who haven't, then obviously it's better to kind of have the vaccination. And one of the things about the Sputnik vaccine that I think is interesting is that how important, and you can correct me on this one if I'm wrong, Rob, but this is my takeaway from the report, is that how important local conditions are, that the batches of quality of the Sputnik vaccine was really, really highly dependent on kind of the local production and how effective it would be. And I think, again, that shows the need for local capacity. One other point that Rob made that I think that just kind of struck me as he was speaking, it's your bricks and mortars, kind of old manufacturing firms. I would put pharmaceuticals in there because so much of it's a physical product. I wonder if European companies are going to be helped more by this shift, by this necessary shift towards technology and or procedural transformation than like American companies, which have been doing this for years. Now European companies are kind of getting poked in the bum and made to kind of to transform themselves. So I wonder if that's also going to help with kind of productivity and competitiveness in what have really been kind of staid, old school, ossified industries.
Rob, what do you think? It would be interesting to know.
Well, it's a very good question, and for now, I have the feeling that we needed this push. To be honest, we needed this push, and it's pushed us in the right direction. It makes us much more agile for the future, and I also see how we are currently developing our future portfolio. It's totally different than what we did in the past, and I think we kind of of course, this crisis was bad for many people and it was terrible for many industries, but some industries got a push in the right direction towards a future where I think the drug development part, the manufacturing part will be improved in the future due to what happened in the last year.
Yep, we need to learn. We need to learn from the crisis. So I think there is a silver lining.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? We have one in the chat. I can read it to you, Chris. It takes back to the education. Is the best way to an educated future generation is a personalized approach? Could you give us an example of such practice? And have you encountered this in your practice?
This is something that academics, and especially kind of academic administrators, have been pushing very hard. Kind of the understanding, it's not just the fads that kind of come, the trends, the passing trends that come in academia, but just kind of how we can, when we get back to the new normal, I'm not going to say if, when we get back, what we can do via Zoom, what we can do via recordings, what we can do in the classroom, and how we can better integrate all of these separate issues. And I think there was a push beforehand to kind of have some innovation, but at some point, you have older lecturers who just like to stand behind a podium and lecture. You have some really innovative thinkers who are trying to have more kind of teamwork, more kind of interactive classrooms. They call reverse classrooms, that kind of thing, where you're really kind of putting the onus on the students. But I think these are all things that are very situationally and contextually specific, that you can have this perhaps in a political science or a law class especially, but you can't do it in engineering. So the personalized, you have to learn the fundamentals. You have to learn the laws of physics, because otherwise it just doesn't work. So I think this is also kind of the issue of the stratification. But I think it too has been given this push, especially since it seems like the past year has been kind of the academic administrator's dream experiment when it comes to education. The school would be great if it weren't for all of the students. So let's get rid of the students and let's just have us talk to the computer. And what we're realizing is that we can't do this whole technological shift. Like I said before, you can't have this technological shift and expect to have these immediate results on productivity. You can't expect to have the immediate results in the educational system. So we've seen that we can't go 100% technology now. But we do know now that we can kind of intersperse these tools in addition to what is kind of the usual classroom experience. And then we can see how we can, by individuals, how we can tailor it by disciplines, and how we can tailor it kind of across universities.
You're right. I'm taking a course in Moscow University right now, and it's all done online. It's a tremendous time-saving, money-saving exercise, considering you don't have to travel, find a room or a hotel to stay in. So it's a huge cost-saving exercise as well. But at the same time, I can tell you, I am so tired of this half a person mode, and there is nothing that can replace me seeing you at the Astana Economic Forum for a second and hugging each other, and you can never compare it to an hour interview online. So
agree.
if the world is going to change, I think that we can do only maybe 10% of this half a person mode, but the rest has to be on a live and offline and personal touch and physical contact. Otherwise, this world is going to go crazy, psychologically crazy.
Oh, we're already there. We're already there with no end in sight. That's the problem. We need to have kind of clear milestones for when we are emerging. Otherwise, yeah, we're all going cuckoo nutter butters. I don't know how that translates po-ruski, so.
Yeah. Do we have any questions, comments? We have the time, maybe 7 minutes, where we can just exchange our opinions and pretend it's a real life meeting. Gordon, Rob, I don't know who is NM6.
Yeah, nothing more from me at this point.
This is the head of mission of Asian Development Bank.
Aha, welcome. Nice to see you. Welcome. Do you have any questions for Chris? I'm not sure if you know each other or be introduced.
Not yet, but hopefully we will reach him out soon. Just to share our observations on outlooks for this year and for the next year. We are, as you probably many of you know, we are producing our annual publication called Asian Development Outlook, and we will do update. So some of the information was useful. I think in about 2 weeks' time, our chapter, Kazakhstan's chapter of Outlook, will be posted, and you will see our observations.
Excellent. We'll be happy to host an event with you, if you like, for EUROBAK audience, and you could share it to our members so we can broadcast it either on Facebook or whatever format suits you.
We will, and I will be happy to cooperate in future as well.
That's great. Thank you, and thank you for being with us this evening. For us, it's evening. For Chris, it's lunchtime. Are you getting really hungry now?
I'm okay. I think I can go for a little bit.
I see. All right. Excuse me. Do we have any more questions? We're ready to wrap up. Chris, thank you so much for being with us, for your loyalty to our magazine for many, many years. It's 15 years this year that magazine is being published. And
fantastic magazine, fantastic association through the tireless efforts of my good friend here. So definitely pat yourself on the back as well. You fulfill a very, very important niche in the country, and I think it should definitely be recognized.
Thank you, Chris. I always say that EUROBAK is a member-driven association, and if it wasn't for members, we would be nowhere. So we have a really, really good team of board members. We have excellent members, very active and contributing. And over the years, the association has been growing and improving in quality for sure. This year seems like a difficult year, but already now we have 3 sign-up members joining. So Gordon, there's a good news there. I hope that maybe at least from the half a year onwards, this will start to come back to normal, that airplanes will be taking off and not standing there behind me. And we all will get a really good quality rest through sitting around a dinner and chatting with our friends and having a glass of wine and enjoying life.
Ja, согласен.
I wish you all the best in Zurich. I hope you will find this post of great value, and it will take you to a another level of professionalism. Say hello to your family.
I
Big
will do.
hugs.
Will do.
And
we'll look for ways to collaborate going forward.
yes, we'll be really happy to do so. Thank you, everybody, for participating and being with us this evening. It's a new form of events, interviews we've come up with for EUROBAK members and for the magazine. We hope to continue. If you have ideas on who we can host and what events we can do, we'll be happy to accommodate and see what we can do for the members and for the audience of the magazine. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you, Julie. And
Enjoy
everyone.
your lunch and hugs to the family.
Hugs.
All the best. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.